Hare Krishna, and a very warm welcome to the 2024 Valentine's Day talk brought to you by the ISKCON Vaishnavi Ministry. Today we are joined by Uttama and Partha Prabhus from the Grihastha Vision Team, who will be speaking to us on the topic of understanding our values. Partha and Uttama Prabhus have been married since 1971 and took initiation together from Srila Prabhupada in 1973. They share 3 creative children and 8 grandchildren. They currently reside in Saranagati Dhama, Canada. They are the founding members of the Grihastha Vision Team since 2004. Together, they have facilitated Grihastha Vision Team seminars in South Africa, Ireland, England, India, Trinidad, Guyana, Brazil, Chile, Russia, and many European countries, along with Canada and the US. Uttama Prabhu has taken relationship education training from Prepare and Enrich Canada, Dasi Ziyad Family Institute, and Compassion Power. She also has Gottman Level 2 clinical couples training and is a graduate of the Developmental model of couples therapy training under Ellyn Bader Ph.D. at the Couples Institute. Partha Prabhu is solemnized to perform legal marriages by the province of British Columbia, which he has done after sufficiently counseling the couples. He is certified by the Dasi Ziyad Family Institute to administer the Vaishnavi 108 infantry and premarital and marriage spiritual strengths-based relationship program, along with skill-building courses by various other marital therapists, including Level 1 Gottman Clinical Couples Therapy. Thank you both so much for taking out the time from your busy schedules to be with us today and share your valuable wisdom. Before we go any further, we'd like to begin by inviting Srila Prabhupada into the room just by saying his pranam mantras. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya,
Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Sunilari Pastancha Desha Tarane.
So just before we get into the actual interview and the questions, I'd like to just give a little bit of a contextualization into why we're talking about values on Valentine's Day. So generally, Valentine's Day is commonly associated with a celebration of love. And with that generally comes a lot of pressure to find a partner to share the day with. And sometimes this can result in us giving up our values in order to feel included or wanted. So almost like a loss of identity. So the thing is that we cannot love someone unless we know how to love ourselves first. Part of self-love is also asserting our boundaries. We can't actually assert our boundaries if we do not know who we are as individuals. So building a healthy foundation of understanding our own values can save us from potential heartbreak later on. When we have a good relationship with ourselves, we can actually show up better in our relationships with friends, family, spouses, and with Krishna, actually. But the focus of today's topic is really around finding out who we are so that we can be grounded, and also in terms of values in relation with finding a partner, a life partner. So we will get into exploring this topic now with just a few sort of basic questions on something like, what are values? So maybe we can start with that. How would you define a value?
Something that's very valuable.
It's a very good word for the concept, because there's different beliefs in life, but there are some beliefs that very much resonate with different individuals. And so for those individuals, that belief or that mode of behavior is going to be very important, and it's going to add happiness and meaning to their life, which is value. It's very valuable to have meaning and a purpose in life and satisfaction. So it's a very apt word to use that term, value.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of that, like it's basically something that comes up in our day-to-day lives. So how do we actually identify our values, and perhaps what are some examples of values that would come up?
I think the way we identify our individual values is to be very introspective of what's important to us, what our direction in life is, and what we need to get there. There's a very nice example in the Srimad Bhagavatam of Kardama Muni, a very introspective sage who went to the forest and performed austerities, I believe it was for 100 celestial years. And one day he looked up and he saw in the distance Garuda approaching with Lord Narayan on his shoulders. And the Lord landed in front of Kardama Muni, offered him any benediction he liked. And Kardama Muni, he could have asked for anything. And he said, "My dear Lord, I think I need a wife of like disposition." So he understood that being married and having a compatible partner with a like disposition was a very important value to him that was going to help him in his spiritual life. And the Lord fulfilled that desire. So that's a very powerful Shastric example of the importance of being introspective and seeing the things and the behaviors we need to acquire and develop to progress in our life and be happy and satisfied and advance spiritually. And for everyone, it's going to be a little different. And it's not that someone can tell you what your values are. They can maybe help you find them and make suggestions of different values that may resonate with you. But it is very important for each individual to do that self-introspection and find those values.
Sometimes we'll notice that we have uncomfortable feelings within us. And often, if we dig a little bit deeper, those uncomfortable feelings can lead us in the direction of our values, because we'll see that that's what's missing.
So how do you, because I think this is a big thing sometimes as devotees, is that you get this uncomfortable feeling, and it's almost like maybe it's the super soul that's communicating with us, or maybe it's our mind. So how do you like differentiate between it's my mind and it's just my conditioning that's coming through, or this is actually something that I should really be paying attention to because it's Krishna trying to guide me in the correct direction?
I was just hearing in a purport, Prabhupada said that intelligence is the sound direction of supersoul. So usually when something's coming from supersoul, it directs us towards some action. When it's in our mind, it's just kind of feelings. Oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I wonder if, it's that kind of thing. So usually when we get some input for an action to take, it's more likely to be super soul.
So in that sense, then, if it's action driven, how would we still know which values to then develop? How would we know how to go about that? Because sometimes we may have a certain set of values, but it's not conducive for the direction in which we're going in life. So how do we know how to further develop ourselves in terms of our values?
I read once a very interesting exercise to help develop your values. And the exercise was to imagine you had left your body and you were just hopefully ascending to the spiritual world. And you're looking down and you see the people that you care about and love the most. There's some ceremony honoring you. Maybe it's your children, your grandkids, your friends. And how would you like them to remember you? For what kind of qualities and what kind of activities? Um, what would resonate with you? What kind of things would you like to hear them to say? You contributed to society. You were a very kind, honest, compassionate person. You were hardworking. What is it you'd like to hear? And that's going to be very much in line with what your real desires are for your values.
I do hear what you're saying, Radhika, because sometimes, say you're in your late teens or early 20s, and you can think that excitement and fun is your value. And maybe a little bit of that is great, but does it really help you work towards what you really want to do with your life? And I guess maybe at that time, that is all you wanted to do. However, I think if we all look a little bit deeper, it's a time of life also when we do want to make some contribution, have some meaning in our lives. And if we just look a little bit deeper, I think we will find them. It is true that values change. As we get older, health is way higher in my value pyramid than it was when I was younger and took it for granted. So they do change, and that's okay.
Association is also, I think, really important in determining your own values, because during your life's journey, you're going to meet people that you may accept as mentors or sources of inspiration. And there's going to be qualities that they have that you're going to aspire for. And it is very important to have that kind of association, especially association of um, elders who are mature and experienced in life. And that's one problem in the world today is actually there's a phenomena, I can't remember what they call it, like old people are kind of shunned. Like no one likes to see old people. But in traditional cultures, elders were looked up to and respected uh, because of the examples they've set. And one problem in today's world, the elders haven't been very exemplary, and um, especially uh, many devotees we meet growing up, they experienced in their life they were lacking in role models, especially in relationship with relationships. And so they don't really know what kind of values they should have around marriage and relationships, which can make it very difficult. So it is important to seek out healthy examples and follow those kinds of examples.
Yeah, that actually talks to one of the points that I had put down, in the sense of how do we live a life that is more aligned with our values, but it's actually finding individuals that are already living that, having those examples to follow. But is there perhaps anything else further to that, maybe that you'd want to add?
Well, I would say I think it's important to, in your life, to have those values, and specifically values that you are aspiring for, like goals in your life that you want to achieve, and what are the sub values that are going to facilitate doing what you want to do. And our happiness in life comes from living our values. Just like in Srila Prabhupada's statement of purpose, the first item was he desired that through a systematic process of education, he wanted to correct the imbalance of values in society. And by doing so, it creates a tranquil situation where people can execute spiritual life properly. So finding those primary values that you're working for and other values that support you getting that value, it becomes like a map in your life. And probably no one goes anywhere nowadays in their car or something without Google Maps if you're in a different city, um, because it gives you the sense of direction very easily. In the same way in our life, if we have those principal values in our focus, it becomes like a guiding post that can give us direction. I had a practical experience about maybe 15 years ago. It was probably a bit more like 20 years ago when we moved to Saranagati. There, I had to accept some occupation in the local community, and there wasn't a lot of choice. And I ended up doing something in a business. It probably wouldn't have been the thing that I would have chosen. And there was a point after I began working there, I was thinking that, what am I doing here? I was feeling resentful of the situation. I'm just working with a bunch of, non-devotee karmis, and it was just, I became very unhappy. And I just had, for a minute, I just kind of stepped back from that situation and tried to look at my life and my values. And one of my primary values was to make a social contribution. And at that time, I was definitely not making much of a social contribution. But just stepping back, I could see, okay, accepting this occupation for some time, it's going to help me get into a situation where I can spend more time and effort on my important values. And just seeing that, seeing the goalpost more clearly and seeing that this is going to help me get to that goalpost, it was a complete paradigm shift for me. I stopped seeing my coworkers as, karmies. I started to treat them like human beings. And I actually developed very good friendships with the people there. And it actually became a very enjoyable work atmosphere. I had a lot of fun there. But just focusing on the primary values, and even sometimes in your life, you may not be where you want to be, but there's situations that can help you get there. And realizing that can make it easier to go through those transition stages, which otherwise by themselves, you might not want to be in that situation.
Sure. That's actually quite profound. But also what I understand is that values are something that grounds us. It's something that we can sort of keep going back to in order to find direction. And sometimes in our jobs, or possibly even in family life or in our services, or even social circles, our values are not aligned with those around us. So to what extent should we, I could say in quotes, tolerate that? Because you just mentioned such a wonderful example, how you sort of changed your perspective on the whole situation. So to what extent do you tolerate, I think? Because sometimes it's like you sort of tolerate and you give in, and then your association basically becomes who you are. So if you continue to tolerate, you're starting to erode that sense of self and possibly derail yourself from the path you initially set out on.
That's a very important point. For one reason, especially like in relationships and in beginning relationships, a couple or, two individuals start associating. And if they're not really fixed in their values, we all have that very strong need to have that sense of belonging. We want to feel loved and included. And sometimes in that quest for love and inclusion in different aspects of life, because that's such a strong need to have that feeling of belonging, we might sacrifice some of our values to feel that sense of belonging. And that, as you're saying, that can be dangerous if it undermines our important values. We're always going to have some situations that are going to involve tolerance and patience. That's one thing. But it becomes toxic if in those kind of situations we start to lose our sense of self-identity. And again, that's why it's important that everyone really needs to define their values and live their values and see that this is something that's very important to me. And the people you're around, they might not agree with you. You might not be the best friends with them, but if they respect your values, then you can coexist peacefully, and you can maintain your set of values, although you might be in a different atmosphere, a working atmosphere in the outside world. At the same time, again, if it becomes toxic and you start to lose that sense of your values and your self-worth,
might be time for a change.
Might be time for a change.
I really like that aspect of mutual respect, because I feel like if we can respect each other, then there may be room for compromise in terms of our values, but we will know what is important to the other person. And so we probably wouldn't push that too far. So this aspect of respect is so important, just in relationships in general, but specifically between partners, actually, because you also know where that line is as well.
For sure. However, we probably would be wise to marry a person who has quite a few similar values as ourselves. We're always going to have some values which are different. However, we do need similar values. Otherwise, you're going to be coexisting side by side, separately, in the same house.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes those values, just in relationship with, say, marriage, we know couples in interfaith marriages, they have very different faiths, but they don't both have, a very solid spiritual core as a value, and they manifest in terms of a different, if you want to say, religious faith or application, but they respect each other. And we've seen some with very dynamic, powerful relationships because there's that mutual respect.
Mm-hmm. Actually, just on that, specifically as devotees, we have sort of our spiritual lives and our, in quotes, material lives. And I always feel like the two should come together really nicely, and you shouldn't have sort of like a split personality in terms of your spiritual life. It's actually very much interlinked. So in that sense, is it necessary to have different values for your spiritual life and I guess your material spaces in that sense? Should the values be different or should they be very much aligned? And then how do you actually look at that in terms of a partner? Because I think sometimes as devotees, it's like, oh, okay, I'm a devotee, so I want my partner to have all these values, but it's not necessarily beneficial for spiritual life. So how do you actually navigate this whole thing? Should the values be different in terms of spiritual and material life? I feel like it would make me a little bit schizophrenic. But how do you actually address that?
Well, we want to have integrity. And we see that many people give the example how Srila Prabhupada was the same in every single situation because he has that integrity to his values. So we may apply our values slightly differently in the workplace and at home. However, I think we will also do well when we try to showcase our important values in the workplace in an applicable way. So I think we do need to have that integrity.
And just like in terms of close relationships, also you want to have that integrity between your spiritual life and your married life, because the manifestation of your spirituality and your spiritual advancement, it's going to appear in your relationships, especially your close relationships. And there's a very cruel irony in the material world. Often the people we love the most are the ones sometimes that we treat
the worst
because of familiarity. So spirituality means to integrate spirituality into every aspect of your life and every interaction. One couple approached us recently and they said they'd taken some marital counseling and it really helped them, but they wanted to kind of spiritualize it. And so I just said, well, actually, your marriage is spiritual. You just don't realize it. Just like in marriage and close relationships, when you get to know someone very intimately, you discover there's things about each other that are going to create some annoyance and frustration. Yeah. And that's 100% normal. And those occurrences of those frustrations and irritations, they're actually key points and opportunities for us to practice humility, tolerance, and patience, which is required, according to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if we desire to constantly chant the holy name of the Lord. So that's a spiritual opportunity for growth when those things arise. And it's important for us to realize that and practice developing that humility and tolerance and patience in those kind of situations that arise where there may be some frustration. Is it always easy? No, but it's something we can practice. And that spiritual life means to practice the mode of goodness and learn those kind of proper behaviors. And, when things go off the track, we can correct and try to do it in a more Vaishnava, loving, compassionate way. So in that way, it's not actually material life. Your marriage can be spiritualized. Like Prabhupada said once, there's many, I'm sure in the walls behind you, there's all kinds of power lines. And Prabhupada gave this example. There's so many different, electrical lines running all over the place, and they all carry the energy of the powerhouse. And he said in the same way, if one is trying to fulfill his the order of the spiritual master and Krishna, one is directly connected with Krishna. Whether one is looking after the children, whatever it is, you're trying to do whatever duty you're doing in your life to the best of your ability in a way that's going to be pleasing to Krishna. That's devotional service. So whether you're a mother looking after your kids, with a husband and wife trying to get along peacefully, it's important. It's not some isolated event that behind closed doors you can behave in a different way, which we usually do. In those situations, it's very incumbent upon us to also be
living our values.
Yeah, living our values and being exemplary.
I think
Thank you so much for your nice questions.
So that's the $1 million question about values.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.